So as far as training goes, everybody has their preferences, we'll call them. How often do you train? Are you in the gym 5, 6 days a week? What's your training looking like these days, at least?
Yeah, right now I'm like 6 to 7 days a week. And they're nothing crazy. Like I said, I don't do cardio for the most part, unless it's like a 2 to 3 minute warm up on the bike just to get my blood flowing, especially before the legs. I'm doing it more for a daily calorie burn out of my weight training session, burn up some sugars, hit the muscle, get it fuller, get it rounder. Intensity and volume wise, I'd say I'm basically in the middle for the most part. I'm middle volume, medium volume, but I'm hitting everything twice a week. So I'm
Okay.
not going to go crazy volume, but just like the supplementation, that's also something that can be tweaked over time. You can actually cycle the amount of volume you're doing, obviously, and I'm going to start ramping that up a little bit over time. So my body has to get more used to higher intensity training. I might start doing one of those priority muscle groups again and throwing that in because that's extra volume technically to bring up certain muscle groups. I like to do my calves, my biceps, and chest when it comes to that priority to help balance out my physique.
So those are the areas you feel that need a little bit extra attention?
Yeah, I always did that to kind of help bring up those body parts, and it worked. My calves came up a lot. I got longer legs and a little bit of a shorter torso. So by having a little bit better calves, it actually made the appearance of my legs look a little bit shorter and rounder
Hmm.
and denser. So that made a huge difference. And my arms have nice shape to them. So I just needed a little bit more. So when I hit the double bicep pose, the biceps look good. So any little bit of growth or roundness I can get in that front double bicep was going to be important. So focusing on that. And then obviously just I have wide shoulders, I have a wider back, and that's just the way that I'm built. So it's very tough to fill out the chest in that regard. So I can never not do enough incline just to try to keep that upper chest halfway decent.
And as far as training muscles or muscle groups, we'll say 2 times per week, is that something you found just to be beneficial as far as growth? Competitors that I've spoken with, once a week, they might hit body parts and they feel like they grow really well on that. And then others swear by hitting muscles more frequently in a 7 day cycle, 7 to 10 day cycle, we'll say.
Yeah, so right now I'm just doing everything twice a week. I'm not saying that that's optimal. It's just working for me at this point. I think the best training routines that I ever did, that I always did, usually one of these two during a pre-contest phase, was a power hypertrophy split.
Is it the Lane Norton style?
Yeah, very similar. I took something similar to that and kind of tweaked it in my own liking. So that was essentially everything twice a week. Technically, actually, yeah. I mean, that was technically everything twice a week because you had the power days on Monday, Tuesday. On Wednesday, I kind of did a calves and abs day. And then I was doing Thursday, Friday, Saturday were the hypertrophy type days. And then Sunday was another like calf and ab day. So I would always be in the gym 7 days a week doing something. And on those calf and ab days, I was doing more posing as well.
Interesting.
So I was doing either that split or I was doing like an FST7, which I would do an FST5 just because FST7 is more geared for guys that are on gear. So
What does that stand
FST5,
for?
fascia stretch training or fascia strength training 7. So what that was, it's Hani Rambod or Hani Rambod's. He created it. So it's basically you stretch the muscle fascia. So you stretch, you do certain stretches in between certain sets. He had the -7 at the end because you were supposed to do a certain exercise for 7 sets in a row with 30 seconds of rest or less in between sets to really pump up and volumize the muscle after you stretched it out. So it brings a lot of blood and nutrients in there, especially at the ending. And then you're also supposed to flex the muscle in between those last 7 sets during the 30 seconds of rest that you have. You're actually flexing the muscle. Those two types of workouts were the ones that I always focused on during my pre-contest phase. And I think that was part of the reason too why I was technically kind of growing, because in my off season, I was just kind of doing like one body part a day, just hit it all out, crush it. And then sometimes have like a day or two off, like maybe train 5 or 6 days a week in the off season. But then in my in season, I don't really consider calves and abs a workout day because I don't train abs anyway. I only did a couple sets of abs in my pre-contest phase. I would destroy my calves on those days too. But
And who inspired you as far as your training goes? From a training side, like where do you like to learn? Where do you like to get your information from? And then we'll talk about motivation wise. Like, were you a fan of the golden era of bodybuilding that you just kind of get you fired up?
my motivation and who I looked up to or whatever, I mean, obviously just my father. I wanted to look a certain way. When I was a kid, I gravitated towards the He-Man and the Incredible Hulks and stuff of the world. And then having a guy like that to look up to. It was like having like your own superhero in your house, all the time.
Yes.
And when he got into bodybuilding, that was just another thing that me and my brother got into. And then we researched it. I was actually a really big fan of the IFBB in the early to mid 90s. Flex Wheeler was my guy. So I always wanted that type of look, the real small waist, round muscle bellies, great structure, shape, conditioning, but still having the size. And the one thing I will highlight, and this is kind of off topic, growing up, especially in the earlier parts of my competing years, my dad, me and him are the same height. I never thought when I was younger that even though he is my dad and that's 50% of my genetics, I just didn't think that I would be able to compete as big as he was. He's always had bigger arms than me, just genetically, as an example, but I never thought I can compete at a heavier body weight and still be in condition. But that was something mental, a negative mental block that I put on myself. I read a book, Skip LaCour, who was a big natural bodybuilder in the early
Yes.
to mid 90s. He was a Team Universe guy. No one thought he was natural either, but he had this little tiny book, and he had a couple books, but one of them I found, and the whole book was just about putting physical limitations on yourself mentally. And when I read that, I said to myself, you know what? You can't keep thinking that you can't be as big as your dad. And I'm not saying that I ever got bigger than him, but I think that I was holding myself back a little bit. And then once I kind of thought the other way around, I started competing a little bit heavier than he was. At that time, I mean, granted, I was, I guess, at a better age maybe, but
Was your training different too? I just want to note
well, I
that.
mean, I also didn't have any limitations, so that was also in my benefit.
Like when you switched your mindset, I mean, like when you thought, okay, I can, maybe I can be at that level, like your dad, for
Oh
example.
yeah, no, that made a huge difference. That's when
Right.
I started competing in the mid to upper 180s to competing at literally 191. I competed at 191 and change. I was that the morning I woke up. The last two seasons in 2014 and 2016, I basically brought the same package. That was huge for me. And I knew
Do you
that I
think your
could be.
training was harder though? Like you felt like you were going in the gym just training harder because you had that mindset? Do you think that
I
there
mean,
was a difference there?
I did train like an animal the last year just because my grandfather passed away like right before. And I think that the way that he was towards me and my brother and stuff like that, it really motivated me where I felt like he was in the gym with me. So I think that that brought me to another level, to be honest. You got to find motivation somewhere, man, and to be able to dig deep in this game. I mean, it's just, there's nobody else helping you. There's no cycles or gear, none of that. So it's one of the hardest things somebody can do. And even people that have done like Navy SEALs training and stuff like that, when they get ready for a show, especially if they have to do it at an elite level, they're all like, dude, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. I don't know how you did this over 30 times. I'm like, sometimes I don't know either.